Where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend into heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall fall on me, even the night shall be light about me. Indeed, the darkness shall not hide from you, but the night shines as the day. The darkness and the light are both alike to you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, whatever, depending on whenever you're watching this, and welcome to the Broken Box episode 2. So glad that you guys had a positive experience with the last episode. A lot of people have been reaching out. They seem to have really enjoyed the content. I'm glad. Love to make it. Really enjoy making it. I'm just glad it's going well, man. So I don't know where we're headed from here, but it's all in God's hands, you know? So I am Steven, if you don't already know, and basically what the Broken Box is just a place for us to talk. And, the Broken Box kind of a play on the idea of going outside the box, but sometimes it's not good enough to just go outside the box. You've got to break it. So that's where that name came from for anybody who was wondering after that last episode. And today, I'm actually super excited about what we're going to be talking about. Today, I'm going to teach you how to run from God. Now, running from God, that is a crazy thought. You might be like, Steven, why would you want to run from God? Well, it's not me per se. It's more so our nature, I guess, to want to hide from God. Why? Because God is this moral standard and we are these moral deviants. So when we are faced with a perfection we can't attain, as humans, one of our natural responses is fight or flight. And since we can't exactly fight it, we're going to fly away from it. We're going to move away. But I think what's going to be so powerful to understand today is that you can't run from God. It's not a thing that you can do. So spoiler alert, I'm sorry, I can't teach it to you. I know you were really looking forward to that tutorial, but I can't give it to you, man, because you can't run from God. Is that something to fear, though? Is that something to be afraid of? Is that something to be scared of? No, I don't think so. And that's what I think we're going to be getting into today. Now, in order to do that, there's a story that I'd like to talk about. I'm not going to talk about the whole story. This is a famous story out of the Bible. It is considered a literary masterwork. One of the greatest pieces of Hebrew literature ever written, and it's in the Old Testament. It's the book of Jonah. It's the book of Jonah. Now, the story of Jonah is a very interesting one. It is a very complex one. It's written in a very complex way with a very interesting story structure, and it utilizes parody, satire, ironic humor, and all these different comedic elements to kind of portray Jonah, the prophet, in a light that almost betrays unimaginable levels of goofy. Like, this story is honestly a laugh out loud, funny kind of story, but there's also a lot of real emotional depth here, like a lot of depth of character you're not going to find in this way in a lot of the rest of the Bible. Like this one tiny book, it's just a couple of chapters, right? Just a few chapters, but it just portrays such emotional depth. Now, the story is really, really good. This is a story, for those of you that don't know, about a guy that gets swallowed by a whale. I don't want to go through the whole story today because I think that's going to be a great episode to do later on. But there's a specific portion I'd like to focus on. So I'm just going to read a passage of this book. It's called the Book of Jonah. And then we'll get into where I think the hiding from God aspect comes into play in this story. For context, Jonah is a prophet, and a prophet is supposed to be a man who takes directions from God and then just does them. So if God says, hey, jump up and down, the prophet jumps up and down. If God says, hey, go to this city of people that you don't like and teach them what it means to come back to me, guess what? That's what you're doing. But Jonah had some differences of opinion with God. Now, the word of the Lord came to Jonah. This is Jonah chapter 1, by the way. Came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and cry out against it, for their wickedness has come up before me. God is saying, I have seen this city. They are one of the most evil cities in the world, right? This group of people really needs my help and my redemption, so go and confront them with that fact. But Jonah arose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid the fare and went down into it to go with them to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. But the Lord sent out a great wind on the sea, and there was a mighty tempest on the sea, so that the ship was about to be broken up. Then the mariners, yeah, the ship people, were afraid, and every man cried out to his God and threw the cargo that was in the ship into the sea to lighten the load. But Jonah had gone down into the lowest parts of the ship and had laid down and was fast asleep. So the captain came to him and said, "What do you mean, sleeper? Arise, call upon your God. Perhaps your God will consider us so that we may not perish." And they said to one another, "Come, let us cast lots, that we may know for whose cause this trouble has come upon us." So they cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. They said to him, "Please tell us, for whose cause is this trouble upon us? What is your occupation? Where do you come from? Where is your country? And of what people are you?" So he said to them, "I am a Hebrew, and I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land." Then the men were exceedingly afraid and said to him, "Why have you done this?" For the men knew that he fled from the presence of the Lord. Fled from the presence of the Lord. Just highlighting that real quick, because he had told them. Then they said to him, "What shall we do to you that the sea may be calm for us?" For the sea was growing more tempestuous. And he said to them, "Pick me up and throw me into the sea. Then the sea will become calm for you. For I know that this great tempest is because of me." Nevertheless, the men rowed hard to return to land, but they could not, for the sea continued to grow more and more tempestuous against them. Therefore they cried out to the Lord, like Yahweh, the Lord, and said, "We pray, O Lord, please do not let us perish for this man's life, and do not charge us with innocent blood, for you, O Lord, have done as it pleased you." So they picked up Jonah and threw him into the sea, and the sea ceased from its raging. Then the men feared the Lord exceedingly and offered a sacrifice to the Lord and took vows. And that is just the first chapter that I read right there. A man who tried to flee from the presence of the Lord for being told to do his job. Jonah is such an incredibly funny, complex character. It's almost like when you're reading this book, it's meant to be like, oh my gosh, are you serious? Like every decision he makes, you're like, well, are you kidding me? Like, come on. The outcome of that has to be obvious. God says do something. He literally does the exact opposite. And he's like, what? Bad things happen. And as readers watching from a removed perspective, we're just like, all right, like every decision you make, like it's going to come with like a hilarious pitfall. And in this situation, it literally ended with him falling into the ocean. When I read Jonah chapter 1, I purposefully emphasized certain words. One of those was, "Now he fled from the presence of the Lord," which is a little phrase that I emphasized. And then also the word "down." He went down to Joppa. He went down onto the ship. He went down into the lower part of the ship. Why? Why do I keep emphasizing that word? It's because in Hebrew, which is a very metaphorical and very deep language, words mean more than just what they mean. And this is the case even in English. If you've ever been to an English class where they're like, the door was blue. So what does that mean about society? You know. But here, there's actually a clear literary device being used that you might not catch if you're just reading it and going, okay, down, 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 down. Now, in this ESV Study Bible commentary, I think it gives you a lot of insight into the depth of this text, because there's a lot of layers to this language. Hebrew is a very metaphorical, very deep language, and in order to really understand the depth of what's being said here, you really have to understand what the original language was also trying to say, because that helps add to the structure of this narrative. So that word "down" that I kept emphasizing over and over again, he went down to Joppa, down onto the ship, down into the lower part of the ship. Why is that important? Well, in the original Hebrew, this is what the ESV commentary says. Went down, the same verb is used when he goes on board, is also a euphemism for death. The suggestion is that each step away from the presence of the Lord is one closer to going down to death. When you're running from God, you don't go towards him, you don't ascend to him, you go down and down and down. Even if I make my bed in hell, you are there. That's in the Psalms. In the depths of the sea, you are there. And then that word "down" is used again when he had gone down into the ship. In contrast to the sailors, Jonah goes down below deck, taking yet another step closer to death. away from God. Down, down, down. And then just to add to that, I think it's just kind of funny that the final portion of this chapter is him going down to his lowest part, which is literally being tossed overboard and falling into the depths of the ocean. In fact, later in the story, and I know I said we weren't going to cover the whole story today, but later in the story, spoiler alert, he gets swallowed by a huge fish. Fantastical element. I know, like, when you first read it, you're like, what? But it just adds to the comedy and the humor of this whole thing. But when he gets eaten by this fish, guess what he prays? He says, I called out to the Lord out of my distress, and he answered me out of the belly of Sheol, or a word that's been translated as hell in that other verse I read before in the Psalm, if I make my bed in hell, if I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. Out of the belly of Sheol I cried, and you heard my voice, for you cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the flood surrounded me. All your waves and your billows passed over me. Then I said, I am driven away from your sight, yet I shall look again on your holy temple. Jonah was cast into the lower part of the earth and was sitting in the belly of a fish, and yet he did not really leave God's watchful sight. When it says he was driven away from his sight, it means he was driven out of his favor, right? Because, the eye of the Lord is upon those who fear him. But in trying to run from God, he ended up in the lowest point of his life. Jonah, in trying to escape God's direction, God's life, ends up in the belly of a fish at the bottom of the ocean after having gone down to Joppa, down onto the ship, down into the lower part of the ship. And now he's down in the water, in the belly of a whale or a big fish. This is the consequence for what happens when we try to run from God. Another example, the very first book of the Bible, in Genesis chapter 3, he would come down every evening and he and Adam and Eve would just chill, bro. They would just talk. Can you imagine what that would have been like? I mean, that's crazy. God just coming down just to chill with Adam and Eve. Guess what, though? When they partook of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, their eyes were open to the kind of perversion that humanity is capable of, right? They no longer knew just good. They knew sin. It's kind of similar to Pandora's box in Greek mythology, right? Like evil was unleashed upon the world through this knowledge that humans gained. So at first they were naked, fully naked in the Garden of Eden, and they didn't care, and God didn't care. Nobody cared. But when their eyes were open to the kind of perversion that nakedness can actually bring out of humanity, all of a sudden they were ashamed. And the Bible in Genesis chapter 3 says they hid from the presence of the Lord. How ludicrous is that? We know you can't hide from God, but they still did. And throughout the Bible, people do over and over again. When the cat's away, the mice will play. But when the cat comes back, the mice go into hiding. Especially when they realize they've taken some of the owner's cheese. Okay, this analogy is getting away from me. But the point is, Adam and Eve did wrong. And they felt ashamed. They were naked and they were ashamed, so that when God came, they tried to hide. They were like, ain't nobody here. Ain't nobody here. Oh, what's that? Oh, God. Like, what's up? I wasn't high. I was just like chilling here. Like, I never noticed how leafy these leaves are. You know what I'm saying? Like these people, they covered themselves up with fig leaves and they tried to hide from the presence of the Lord. And God came down. He was like, yo, Adam, where are you? You think he didn't know? He knew exactly where they were. But sometimes God asks that question, where are you? What are you doing? Where are you going, to draw out an answer from you? And they were ashamed, so they came out of hiding and were like, haha, yeah, here we are. We messed up. Haha. And God was like, the one thing I told you not to do, you did it. But the point is, they tried again and again and again throughout the Bible. Humanity tried again and again and again to hide from God. Were they ever successful? Your sin will find you out. The things that have been done in darkness will be brought into the light. There's nothing that is secret that will not be revealed. I mean, all these verses are showcasing that God is a God of truth. The truth shall set you free. Do we hide from God? Do you think God doesn't see you in your worst moment? Do you think he doesn't see you at school? Do you think God doesn't see you at work? Do you think God doesn't see you at your Friday night hangouts with the boys? Do you think God doesn't see you at the club at 3 a.m.? Do you think God doesn't see you in your dorm room? Yo, chill. Do you think he's got blind spots? Because that's the way we live, isn't it? Because we act a certain way when we go to church or when we're around holy people. But do you think that just because you're not in a church building or just because you're not around the Bible thumpers that God doesn't see you? Is that something to fear? Maybe. A little bit. Healthy fear is a good thing. The idea that someone's watching you helps keep you accountable, and accountability is one of the biggest things that is missing from our culture today. We don't have accountability. We need to be held accountable for the things that we do. We can't just let ourselves do whatever we want, whenever we feel like it, however we feel like it, because that is a recipe for disaster. God is necessary in our world more than anything, because nothing else can keep you accountable the way the idea that God is watching can if it really soaks into your spirit. The thing is that it doesn't. Even for those of us that believe in God, and I'm speaking to myself here as much as I'm speaking to anybody watching, as for those of us that believe in God, we think subconsciously, oh, God doesn't he doesn't see me here. He sees you in your room at 3 a.m. He sees you in the dorm. He sees you at the club. He sees you at Friday night hangouts with the boys. He sees you wherever you go. If you ascend to heaven, he is there. If you make your bed in the depths of Sheol, in the depths of the earth, he is there. There is nowhere you can hide from God's presence. Is that something to fear? I don't think so. Because in Jonah's case, he doesn't think so. Even in that psalmist case, he rejoices because he's like, there's nowhere I could go. It's not there's nowhere I could go to escape from God. It's there's nowhere I can go to escape from God. Same sentence, different mentality. It's not oh, dang it. He's going to see whatever I do, so I can't do messed up stuff no more. No, it's oh my gosh. The creator of the universe has his eyes on me at all times and cares deeply about what I'm doing. I am in his sight at all times. So even when I feel like life is getting worse, I can take comfort in knowing that I'm being watched over. The presence of a parent is only a scary thing if you've got something to hide. The presence of law enforcement is a scary thing when you've got something to hide, but when you don't, they are a welcome symbol of protection and care and comfort. What do we have to hide? What are we hiding from God for? Has he told you to do something and you just haven't done it? Or is it a situation where you feel like you can't really be near God because of your guilt, like Adam and Eve? But I'm here to tell you something. God's already seen it. Whatever might be making you feel guilty or whatever, right? God has seen it. So you don't have to feel trapped in this game of trying to hide and play church, play holy for God, because he knows you as you are. All that you are lays naked before him. And we don't like being exposed as humans, but it's a comforting feeling to know that I don't have to play a character around God. In fact, it is disingenuous to do so, because he knows you exactly as you are. The worst parts of yourself, he knows, and he chose you anyway. He knows the worst that you're capable of, and he still said, I want you. Now the question is, are you going to spend your life hiding, going down, down, down like Jonah did? Or hiding from the presence of the Lord among his creation like Adam and Eve did when they knew they messed up? Or are you going to run arms open wide and say, Dad, I messed up and I need your help. I made a mistake, and you've already known it. All you need is for me to admit it. Why did he have to say, Adam, where are you, if he knew exactly where Adam was? Because the heart of God is for you to know your own insufficiencies so that then he can be invited in to work on them. God wasn't like patrolling that garden like, gotcha, like he wasn't like, there you are, I knew it. Like, of course he knows exactly where you're at. The question is, are you going to make the step, make the effort to meet him in the middle? You can't hide from God. It's impossible. And maybe that's not such a bad thing. All right, I think that's where we're gonna call it today. Thank you for joining me on episode 2 of The Broken Box. I had a lot of fun. And if you have any questions, any concerns, any ideas, please feel free to reach out. Follow me on Instagram at @theofficialsteerx. It should be somewhere on the screen, and it's also in the description. I post a lot of these clips from this on there, even on YouTube. Please subscribe, follow the Instagram, all that good stuff, people. Hope you're enjoying. And most importantly, I hope God's speaking to you in some way through whatever is happening in this room. This has been the broken box, because sometimes it's not good enough to go outside the box. You've got to break it. And that's all. So I'll see y'all, everybody. Bye-bye.